Um, all right, I'm excited about this. Let's start with this. I'm curious to hear where everyone is from. So if you could type in the chat window where you're from, I am streaming this from Boise, Idaho. Normally, I'm based in San Jose, California, Silicon Valley epicenter, where we have great Silicon Valley jargon like pre-revenue companies, which is code for we don't make any money. New York City. Oh, New York City. That is quite the place. It makes me just thinking about New York City makes me hungry. Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh would probably also make me hungry, but I've never actually eaten anything there. Kevin Lee, how's it going? Kevin Lee already finds my stupid jokes funny. Ethan Hawks, Irvine. I actually lived in Irvine when I was a little kid. I went to old. We have someone, Julia from Odessa, Ukraine. Benita and Kevin are both from SF. That's good. Good to see some SF representation. We got someone from Indianapolis. All right. Okay. So enough dilly dallying. If I've put this on the home screen here. So okay. So welcome to Grow and Convert's first webinar. Full disclosure, webinars make me extremely nervous. So I can build and do cost models and analytics for blogs all day, but using webinar software like this was I had to cross three minor miracles just to get this thing to work. So it's good to see people already here. Oh, this is wonderful. Chattanooga, more SF, Washington, D.C. Lindsay Bain. I was just in Washington, D.C. I acted like a tourist and took photos by the Lincoln Memorial. It was amazing. And then we have two people from Irvine. Oh, that's so fun. So, okay. So I finally got this to work. The quality it starts off at YouTube auto adjust to some tiny quality. So if the picture looks super fuzzy to you, it should be streaming. It should be providing data at 720p. So just go down to the gear icon and move it up, and you should be good to go. I tested that. So let's get started. So for those of you that maybe have not seen this, which would be odd if you signed up or and on this webinar, but you don't know about the actual post. This is based on a post. You can see it's our recent post on Grow and Convert customer acquisition cost of content marketing. And the background story of this, which again you guys should already know, is that we talk to a bunch of companies. We talk to them all the time, and we work with some of them, etc. And often I would ask, because my background, I run a conversion optimization consultancy, like A/B testing for high traffic sites, and so that's all ROI based. People are running PPC ads, or just have general organic traffic to say an e-commerce store, and every percentage of conversion is really important. And then while we did Grow and Convert for the past year with Benji, while I did that, exposed to this whole group of companies, many of which are very different businesses from typical sort of e-commerce, high volume, low price point stuff. We have agencies that sell $10,000 a month plus deals. We have B2B enterprise software, right? These are low volume, high traffic, and they invest significantly in content marketing because there's a whole customer education segment around it. This makes sense. Lo and behold, when we ask people, okay, so how many leads is content bringing in? There's this huge sort of politician dilly dance, like we're in the election. Well, I don't know, this thing and then that thing, and then this guy's not measuring, and I can't quite tell this and that. And many times it's like, okay, let's zoom out then. Just how many leads, like how many people are actually getting to a thank you page from a lead form, or start a free trial, or do some initial action to express interest in the product offering. And even that, people are like, I don't know. And so this was a total revelation to me. Benji told me, I've been telling you this. So because he's lived and breathed this, what you guys are doing. And he said, I told you, people don't know this. And I said, I can't make a model around this. It's too basic. And he was like, no, trust me. So this is how this happened. And so in particular, we went straight to this thing, that this abbreviation CAC, customer acquisition cost. Or cost of customer acquisition, because it's sort of the end-all be-all metric for any sort of acquisition channel, which in the end, I would argue, is sort of what marketing does, right? And so calculating that, I was like, well, we should start here with some basic thing. And so that's what this is all about. We made a simple spreadsheet model. So I want to walk through that, walk through different scenarios. The article itself has the basics, and we'll talk about what to do in a lot of other real world scenarios on this actual webinar. So here is visually how to think about it. And you don't have to necessarily be a math person. The most complicated function in calculating CAC is divide. Okay, so like it's fine. It shouldn't be that intimidating. And it has a simple principle, right? So this cost of acquisition is just adding up the costs and dividing by how many customers you're getting. So adding up costs, that's straightforward, and we'll talk about that. And then dividing how many customers you're getting is just traffic times what percentage of that traffic can you convert. And down there I see traffic times conversion rate. By the way, you can see how webinar inept I am. I can't figure out how to get my cursor to appear, so I'm just going to talk about elements on the screen. So traffic times conversion rate, and that can be multiple steps. So that's how we're going to talk about two different scenarios: a B2C self-serve type company and B2B where you have to send somebody to a salesperson before they convert, right? So self-serve means things like customer sort of B2C SaaS or even B to small business SaaS, things where the customer can literally pay by themselves, like completely self-serve without talking to a human. It also includes e-commerce. It includes any sort of small type sale, typically small, where the person can buy by themselves. So let's talk about that first. And I want to give an example. So I found an example, Groove. And I'm not going to tell you necessarily what Groove does, but we're going to go straight to Groove's site. And I'm going to walk through kind of how the funnel works from somebody who lands on a blog post. And then we'll talk about the model in relation to this. Now, so just if you know what Groove is, that's fine. But let's just pretend you don't, right? So this is the typical user experience being attracted to a brand, and hopefully we can get them to convert to a brand by landing on content. So presumably I'm interested in customer service, or we all are, right? So we land on this. The article looks great. How good customer service helps one company increase conversions by 150%. Great. It's a story. There's a case study. So right here at the top, if I'm curious, presumably I'm in the customer service like space. I don't know what Groove is, so I can take a couple actions. I can click here and go to groovehq.com. Okay, so that'll probably teach me about the product. And up here, they have nothing else in the nav bar. Interesting choice. I actually think it's probably a very good choice. Brought to you by the team behind Groove, a simpler help desk. Boom. See how you can help you. And it goes to, if you look on the bottom right of my screen, or even if you can't see it, /overview, groovehq.com/overview. So here we have a couple ways for somebody to actually, convert, and they can read through the blog post, and maybe there are things inside the blog post that convert. Often a lot of companies have stuff down here. So the first kind of action in our acquiring a customer funnel is that they have to click one of these. So I'm just going to click this one from a blog post. They have to do something. And Groove actually, because I've already been to their site, you didn't see it, but they have a small slider at the bottom. And if you go to any Groove blog, you'll see that says like, try us out, blah, blah, blah. And it goes straight to sign up. So that's sort of one action that has to happen. And then presumably you can go around, you can figure out what the product is. Okay, so we figured out now it's some help desk software, right? So let's say we proceed down the funnel path. This is what I mean by B2B self-serve. So in this case, there's a free trial, typical like free trial SaaS thing. This is true of other products, QuickBooks, other accounting software, Buffer, things like that. So we could enter this stuff and create my account. At that point, we would probably reach some kind of thank you page, and we've taken this initial action. So that's kind of the funnel we're talking about for B2C self-serve. Now, let's switch over to the model. Keep in mind, I want to reemphasize, I gave Groove as an example because they have a blog that gets a lot of traffic, etc. It doesn't necessarily need to be SaaS. I wanted to emphasize this a couple times. It can be anything. So it could be e-commerce. The interaction could be I'm reading a blog about, say, apparel like menswear, and then I click, I'm reading a blog about like how to wear sports jackets or something, and they link to certain sports jackets or menswear or sweaters or jeans in the blog post, and I could go then to an e-commerce store. Then my initial first action would be, adding to cart, etc. It could be that, it could be any sort of business. So that let's talk first about the top half. If I flip back over to my keynote, this top half here. Well, actually, the bottom part, traffic times conversion rate. So this is the actual customers acquired, and then we'll talk about cost next because that's just how the model is structured. So let me get back. Okay, so and presumably I'm assuming you've kind of looked at it a little bit. So this green part, acquisition, goes through this funnel. So having seen Groove, this is what I mean. So this is an input. Monthly unique visitors, people entering the blog. Then you'll need some conversion rate. You'll need to know or assume, and we'll talk about what to do if you don't know these numbers. But presume that let me start by a simplest case of presume you actually know what these numbers are. So say Groove has 30,000 people to their blog. I have no affiliation with Groove. I have no idea how many people they get to their blog. Okay, and so 1% say actually go through some of these steps and sign up for a free trial of their help desk software. That means they get 300 free trials a month, right? But that's not a customer yet. Those people aren't paying. Then they have some free to paid conversion rate. And I'm just going to put this at 10%, and you can look this up for different SaaS type things or things in your industry, whatever your business is. When I multiply all of these together, right, you get 30, right? So 300 free trials times 10% is 30. That's how many customers are acquired. So that means we know this number. So all we need to do is divide costs by that, and we get the actual cost of acquisition. And that's largely sort of how this works, right? So for some of you, you may be like, oh my God, I know this is really boring. But just, have some patience. There are others that appreciate sort of walking through this. And so literally it's just dividing, like I said. So there's no tricks up our sleeve. So you have some sort of month, and I'm doing everything in this model. This model is all geared to monthly costs, and you can adjust that. Like there's nothing that presumes that it's monthly. So if your business works in terms of annual costs or something else, then just adjust accordingly. Make this the total number of unique visitors per year, free trials per year. Then you'll get paying customers per year. And you divide by total yearly costs, and you'll still have one number. This is not per unit time. It's just a cost to acquire one customer. Okay, so that's division. So then the rest of our task then is simply adding up these costs, and that's company by company. And I want to walk through sort of what's available in this model, and then we'll talk about what to do if you don't know a lot of these numbers. Okay, so just let me take one break. Okay, so no critical, so people are sort of chatting amongst themselves. People asked, what about the agency model? That I'm going to discuss second, Bogdan, just a second. So that'll be, I know you, Bogdan. So that'll be the B2B service model. So we'll talk about that in a second. So now let's just walk through these different costs, okay? So I've split up the costs into a couple buckets. Costs to actually produce the content, okay? Costs to hire marketers to do work, like, they sort of like full-time salary people, and then tech costs. So you've read the article, so I can, boil down exactly sort of what's happening. The bulk of the costs are human. Like when I put in reasonable costs that like typical companies spend, it's salary stuff, and tech just doesn't matter, right? So I was apparently playing with this model right beforehand. And so I put in 0%. But if we say there's a marketing manager that spends 33% of their time, then this should become non-zero. Well, that's embarrassing. Well, I think maybe my computer. There we go. My computer is just acting super slow because I'm streaming. So let me go through these costs one at a time here. So here, I've put a section here for companies that outsource writing, like on a per post or per article basis. If you don't do that, you don't need this section, which means just put 0 on your actual cost here instead of 300, and everything will just zero out. Your total monthly cost per article will zero out. You see that? So that's fine. So ignore it. If you do, then here's how I've broken this down. I just have costs, per article to a writer. And here I've had some people tell me, look, this costs like $750 per article now, etc. It's going to be a huge function of what your business is. If your business requires, writing articles that a lot of people can write, fitness is common these days, like lifestyle, etc., then you'll probably pay less than if you have, some SQL database software thing that requires extremely technical writers are going to charge you more. So you got to put that in. But the beauty of actually modeling this stuff, what I like about this is that you can now do this. And so even if your costs are really high, a lot of you may be thinking, well, shit, I haven't actually calculated this stuff, and I'm in charge of doing content marketing. What if we calculate this and we figure out that the cost of acquisition from content is enormous because maybe we're only getting 5 customers a month or 1 or 0, and we're paying a bunch of people, a lot of which is to me and my salary. Do I want to reveal this to people? That's up to you, right? But at least now, even if you don't show this to the executive team or what have you, which I'm not advocating any sort of duplicitous behavior, but you can at least for yourself, or if you're a founder and you're like, oh God, we're spending all this money on content marketing, it's not doing anything. At least now you have a starting point to ask yourself, well, what needs to change for this to make sense? Okay. So that's an aside. So that would add up, and then just multiply by a number of articles per month. Okay. If you're producing more articles, it's going to cost you more per month. And that's going to be total monthly cost. That's that. Then there's fixed costs for the actual salaries. And here I just want to talk a little bit about what I did. And I mentioned this in the article. Put the actual salary in here. This is kind of a kludgy way for me to actually have done it. I should have probably had a line out here for you to adjust the base salary. I'm multiplying by 1.3. There's a link in the actual article. That factors because the company actually is paying operating expense, cash has to be paid more than your salary, right, for benefits, etc. Dividing by 12 for monthly costs. And then I've put some numbers here on the side to say, for you to adjust and say, well, our marketing manager, maybe that's you, or this, junior hire or whatever, or some developers, are only spending, a fraction of their time on content. I know a lot of you don't. There was a comment on either the blog or on inbound.org when we first published this. It said, well, the problem is we don't track our time, so we don't know how much time we're putting there. That's okay. So just like a lot of, what we're going to talk about today is what do you do if you don't know everything? That's fine. So create an estimate and then start adjusting the number, right? So, and let me just save that discussion for the sensitivities part. So add that up and that'll give you a total here. You can also, there's a line here if you have completely outsourced to some agency, a marketing agency or a content marketing agency, and you've completely outsourced it. And so if you've done that, you can sort of zero out what your costs are, unless there's probably some costs of some marketing manager has to spend some fraction of their salary managing this outside team. So you should keep that in mind. You're probably paying them, so all of this is going to be zero in that case. And then you put that cost there, and that's a monthly cost that you pay them. So that's there, and you can already kind of see from the numbers. This is $1,200 a month. If you're spending $300 an article times 4 articles a month, so once a week, plus say a third of some marketing manager's time, and no other employees, no serious developer time that's worth counting, no content associate, right? So 0. I should probably put 0 here. And no outside agency. So, a few $1,000s a month the company is already spending to do this, right? So then you have software costs. Largely here, for most companies, the costs are minimal unless you use expensive all-in-one marketing automation software like HubSpot or competitors. Those can cost thousands of dollars a month. So I put a line here for that. In this scenario, I'm modeling a situation where the company is presumably using WordPress free and some email provider, maybe some landing page software. And I'm just ascribing all of that to content marketing. And you can, I know a lot of companies we've talked to, there's some, internal bureaucratic politics, and you want to show that content is doing well and these other people, and you could say, hey, we're not the only people using our landing page software. The paid ad team is using more landing pages than we do. Or there's some, for e-commerce companies, email software is a lot more than $50 a month. A lot of you that are not in e-commerce don't realize that there are e-commerce companies that pay $10,000 a year in the annual license for expensive email software, so they can send you, the type of targeted emails like Macy's or Nordstrom's or whatever Trunk Club is sending you when you buy anything or don't buy. So put all that stuff here. And again, if you want to, you can copy the same type of formula I've used up here to start splitting. If you have some expensive software, to start splitting and say, oh, I'm going to ascribe some percentage of it to content because the other part, some other teams use that. That's okay. And then that'll total up here. And that's it. Right? So we'll talk about what's gray down there. Those are some other models. That gives you the total costs. And that's literally it. Oop, probably shouldn't zero that out. We've added up all the costs, and we're dividing by the customers acquired, and that's initial sort of cost of acquisition, right? And so in this case, we're getting 139 bucks. And I'm not going to go into in this webinar unless you guys are interested, how good that is or what that number is, because this is all a hypothetical company, but you should put that in yourself. So before, what I want to discuss next is a couple things, but mainly, what do you do in certain scenarios if you don't know what it is and how to sort of play with the model? And we'll talk about some of these sensitivities. But I want to pause for a second and let you ask some questions if you have any. So let me just review the questions. So Mark makes a good point, and we'll show that in the model. Mark McKnight says, it's worth noting there's a break point where content marketing snowballs and will be far cheaper than outbound selling. For sure, and that's true for a lot of companies. So I'll pause for a little bit. I know there's a little bit of a delay from when I'm actually talking to when you guys are seeing things. Let me just take a sip of water, and then we'll actually just take Mark's comment and we'll roll with it into the sensitivity section. Okay. Actually, I lied. Bogdan mentioned, what about other companies like an agency model? So before we talk about sensitivities, let me just clarify that. So for B2B enterprise, the funnel is different, but the costs are the same, right? I mean, you still, regardless of how you're acquiring customers or how many you acquire, you still need to produce some amount of content. So all the cost stuff really operates the same. To adjust that for your company. But let's talk about the B2B actual model. And so for that, in Keynote, and now I'm gonna do the super annoying thing by jumping around. I just found a site, Client Boost, which is a PPC agency that we will be profiling, just like we did with Saul Orwell and Examine.com, a PPC agency that is really successful, run by Jonathan Dane. And so I just was thinking about it, and so I'm using him. So PPC agency, right? So you sit here and you're reading a blog post about keyword planning, because that's what you do, and then you're like, well, maybe I need to hire an agency, etc. So for them, it's pretty obvious. They have get proposal here. So this is a very typical agency model. So I have to fill out a form. I want to increase, get more conversions. I advertise nationally, continue. Presumably at this point, then at some point, this is an agency. They'll send me a proposal, and a human being, i.e. a salesperson, will reach out to me and try to sell me on this. And there'll be this whole sales kind of shebang. And that's modeled here as follows. So you still have some monthly unique visitors. Now, in this case, I've put a much lower number, but it's sort of still a two-step process that I've modeled. And yours may have multiple steps. We can talk about that. Qualified leads per unique visitor, right? So generally, it's a hell of a lot lower than any kind of free trial or self-serve type business, right? Because agencies, I'd have to pay Client Boost probably thousands of dollars a month, whereas some self-serve thing is, I'm buying jeans for $100 or trying some software for free trial or whatever. So a much smaller amount. And then after the leads will have some close rate. I don't know what that is. It'll depend on your business. And then you just get a paying number of customers. If you have multiple steps, just add another step, right? And copy the same formulas I have here and just multiply again. So for example, you may have some very specific funnels for your business. For a typical one is B2B enterprise software, where it'll be talk to a salesperson. The salesperson talks to them. There's some fraction of people that'll do that. Then the salesperson asks them, can we give you a demo? And sometimes that process is switched or it's flipped. They'll give you a demo. Then there's some fraction of people that take the demo, right? That's another step of qualification. And then from that, there's probably this sort of like long song and dance to actually close that lead. And then you get a paying customer. That's fine. Just add multiple steps here. You can add rows to Google Analytics. You can ask me questions if you're having trouble with that. And that same thing happens. So that's sort of how that's built. So let's take Mark's comment and kind of go into sort of different scenarios here. So Mark says, well, at some point, there's a breakpoint where content marketing snowballs and it'll be far cheaper than outbound selling. What does that mean, right? There's sort of a loaded comment. So let me try to say what that means, for me, because I've seen that happen. There are companies, like clients that I work with in the CRO business, where their blog gets not 30,000, but 200,000 unique visitors. So before I actually change that, note this is, for I think reasonable numbers. So this company is spending 4,000 a month, 2,800 ascribed salary cost to some marketing manager who manages a team of writers, $300, spending $1,200 a month on writers, so non-trivial, and $100 or more on software. They're getting good traffic, for a lot of blogs, 30,000, pretty decent conversion rate to free trials, I think, from a blog, a 1%, 30 paying customers a month from content is nothing to sneeze at. So it's still a decent acquisition cost, say, if this is B2B SaaS, 139. It's actually pretty good. And if you want to know what's good or not, there's a bunch of links in the article at the top that link to other people discussing that. But if the company lasted for years, consistently produced good content, and they started to get serious SEO content, traffic, I've seen companies, like I work with companies where this number is 200,000. So let's even say the conversion rate dips significantly and is like 0.5%, in half, and it could be 0.25% or what have you. What this snowball argument means is that they can produce, from 30,000, 200,000 monthly unique visitors, or even 100,000, without producing that proportional amount, spending that proportional amount on production of content, because the snowball effect is that content attracts search engine traffic and referral traffic and links. So if you produce premier pieces of content or controversial pieces of content that a bunch of people link to, it starts ranking on Google, and there's just a lot of referral traffic from other sites linked to it. That just is like free money. I mean, it's free traffic, right? And you don't need to incrementally pay more to writers to produce it. It's not linear. That just comes, even if you stop all content production, say, for a couple of months, right? If that happens, let's scroll up. That's insane. The cost of acquisition dips to $42. Our cost didn't change, still $4,160, or whatever your cost ends up being. But now you're getting 100 paying customers a month from content. And that $42 is really hard to replicate from paid channels, because paid channels don't have the snowball effect, right? Like I said, if you stop producing content, but you get a ton of SEO content because you just have like historically good content, it continues. The moment you stop paying Google or Facebook, their traffic stops. It's paid acquisition. The moment you stop paying a sales team to do outbound calls, the sales team doesn't work for you. There are no outbound calls. The leads stop completely, like you dam the river. But that's not true in content, and so that, in my interpretation, is that snowball effect, and that's the power of content marketing long term, right? Long term, and so you can Google companies like let's even just try this. Let's Google something like best sales CRM. I don't know. I haven't Googled this. Maybe I shouldn't do this when I do it. So a ton of actual PPC ads, right? And then we scroll down. Business News Daily, Capterra, PC Mag, Zapier. So these guys are listing, right? Best CRM software of 2016. This is what I mean. If I make some CRM software, some Salesforce competitor, Pipedrive, Pipeline Deals, whatever, there's like literally millions, Sugar CRM, Salesforce, etc. I don't need to rank for best sales CRM. By the way, this keyword is probably worth like $4 million a click. But over time, right, these people are going to link to me, right? And this is a really artificial example because this is such a key such a sought after keyword, but you can imagine like a million other keywords that people ask to like to find your business. If you have stuff on the front page, that's just that stuff will continue, right, organically. This stuff up here will not. So that's sort of what you do here. So that's the snowball effect. So you can see the power of it. How can you leverage that if you don't have 200,000? What you can do is, for a lot of companies that are early on, we've talked to people even while building this model and doing the post that said, hey, I'm a new hire. So our real answer right here is like 2,000. So if I plugged that in, and even if I was converting, at 2,000, say it's targeted traffic, 1.5%, I'm getting 3 paying customers a month. So they're paying me. So it's $1,000, to acquire a customer. You're like, hold on. That doesn't mean the model is useless for you. And this is what I mean by, what to do. And I've completely gone off of the presentation. But anyway, there was a slide here that sort of talked about this. So, but I can do it off the top of my head. So it doesn't mean the model is useless for you, or it's quote unquote not useful yet, or we'll need it later. In my view, you should use this as sort of a guiding goal set to say, this is what I want to eventually get to. So when discussing this with your management, your executives, your founders, your board, right? If the board is saying you're a couple of founders and the board is saying, why are you investing in content? Like, have you thought through whether you should go a paid ad acquisition route or a content marketing route? What you say is, it's 2,000 now, right? And you use this as like a way to look at where it could get to eventually. There's a couple ways to do it. One, you could just play with the numbers like we just said and say, okay, if we get to 20,000 in say 4 months or what have you, we would get to 139. We know that our LTV, lifetime value of a customer is worth more than $139. Maybe the customer is worth thousands of dollars, right? Maybe the customer is worth, I don't know, $500 to acquire. So you're making good profit on it. Then the model itself becomes useful. You say, hey guys, like, this is what we need to do to get there, right? And on the same token, if you don't know, a lot of companies will say, okay, so let's say this is at 15,000. We have 15,000 uniques right now, but we're not measuring our conversion rates really well, so we actually don't know how many free trials we're getting. Or maybe the blog isn't set up the way Grooves was, or the blog content is attracting really bad customers. It's a very common complaint. Sales teams and other people will say, oh, marketing is bringing in really unqualified clicks or unqualified leads. And so say this is down at like 0.1, where you just start measuring and it's tiny. Oh no, we have 15,000 views to the blog. We're only getting 1.5 customers, paying customers a month. Content is useless, right? Look at this. Cost of acquisition is $2,700. That's okay, right? At least now you have a measure of it. You're not just guessing and throwing darts in the dark. And so you say, okay, well, this is our problem. So let's increase this and see, like, what do we have to get to? Say, and you work backwards. And you say, we know that this cost of acquisition needs to get under, say, $200 for it to be sort of a profitable, long-term, sustainable acquisition channel. So what do we have to do to get it to $200? So you can play with this and say, well, what happens if we get it to 0.5%? Oh, we're getting close, $500. So what happens if we get it to 0.75%? $370. And if we get to 1.1%, $252, etc. And what I've done also on the side to help you is I've created graphs where you can kind of do that. And some of these graphs are going off because I wanted to take screenshots for the blog post, and I made all of these like hard and fast things. But anyway, you can adjust that. And you can see that and say, well, okay. And you can show this to your team and say, I'm keeping conversion rate fixed at 1% and then 10% free to paid. And I'm varying traffic, and you can just enter different traffic numbers here and seeing what happens to my cost per acquisition. Hey guys, like, this is an explanation, an inflection point. There's a huge drop from 0 traffic to say 50,000 uniques. I don't know, maybe we're at 10,000 or something up here. If we just keep at it for the next 12 months, this could be a game-changing acquisition source. So that's something that's really important, and Benji and I talk about this a lot, that content marketing is a long game. If you want to test like getting clicks to a landing page or getting some sales on e-commerce, you put up some Google ads or Facebook ads or whatever and do that. That's fine. And content will be slower. But if you want to build a sustainable business that has an acquisition channel that's sustainable long term, that has, as Mark McKnight's comment in the chat said, a potential to snowball and become better than any outbound sales technique, etc., then you have to play for the long game. And these graphs will let you show, and the model will let you show and discuss with the team what metrics would we have to get to in the long game to hit cost of acquisition that would make sense for us. And the graphs can show you immediately, we're here, guys. And if we get here, that's transformative. It's under $100. And if we really, kick ass over 2-3 years, then we can get to just obscene rates, $25 acquisition. That also shows the benefit. So that's one key thing. So I really want to emphasize this. Like, I think the way a real company, the way I explain the model in a blog post or in this webinar is by talking about, how I get to the final number, right? Hence that this graph that we're talking about, where I'm like going through all the, or this sort of diagram of division, I'm going through all this. When you actually use it, though, really the number is what should guide it. You should use it in the opposite sense and say, we know that cost per acquisition or customer acquisition cost needs to be X for it to be profitable. So let's start playing with these parameters and see what's a quick way to get there. Do we have traffic but need conversions, or vice versa? And then you can use these graphs to get there. And by the way, the way these work is they have a segment that I've highlighted in yellow that you're actually adjusting in this sensitivity section. And then all the rest of the numbers they pull from this first column. So if you're a B2B enterprise sale one, or anything, whatever your customer is, I actually suggest when you do that you delete the second example. Like, I've put these two examples on here because I'm sort of providing it to a bunch of people. But in your case, you have one company, presumably. And so delete that and adjust accordingly. So even if you're whatever, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter, whatever your sales funnel, just use this left-hand one, and all of these values should pull from that. So like whatever you put most recently here, it'll be reflected in all of these graphs. And then the yellow highlights is what are adjusting. So if I keep going through this, varying full-time salary. So let's make this customer acquisition cost a little bit lower so we can get these graphs in some reasonable range. So varying full-time salary is down here. Everything else is pulled from the left-hand model, and I'm just adjusting the salary, going from nothing, like, and that's not fantastical scenario. It's not fantasy. It happens, there's like some founders, or you're a cell phone business and you're like, I'm not really paying. I don't count myself as a salary or whatever. That's aside from it. So, this is what if I started to hire a contractor or some manager on a part-time basis and then work their way up to full-time, like, what could I, how would that affect my overall CPA? Can I afford to do that? Same with articles a month, promotion spending, etc. And conversion rates, you can see, are also highly sensitive. Not a big surprise. So, these things multiply just like traffic, so they're sort of equally as sensitive. And by the way, you may say, why are these linear? I told you, by the way, guys, that we're going to geek out in the emails on this thing, so I'm about to geek out and fulfill the promise. I asked, why are these linear and these have this sort of exponential drop? For those that want to geek out, it's because these are in the denominator, and so they drop like 1/x. So as this number, the amount of customers acquired, gets bigger and bigger, it slowly gets closer and closer to zero, or quote unquote, it asymptotes to zero. So that's why it has that shape. In case your boss or your bosses ask you that, you can say that and really sound like you know what you're doing. So in other words, when you get to really high values, the incremental increase in traffic or conversion rate doesn't make as much of a difference because it's already so low, the overall cost of acquisition. But at low values, when you're starting out and you haven't optimized things yet, you can make massive, massive wins. Like the difference between 0.5% and 1.5% is huge, right? You would get from, in the 200s down to less than 75. I mean, it's more than halving your cost of acquisition. And so, producing these graphs for your numbers is powerful. You can say, oh, we need to get to this amount. After that, it's sort of, the marginal improvement is smaller, but let's get there because there's a huge wins to be had. Okay, so that's sort of sensitivities. Let me stop for questions again. Yeah, so Julia asks, will I share the link to the template? I Yeah, so the actual model is at growandconvert.com and at the article. And so we don't so there's a reason we keep it behind an email wall. So I presume you've gotten to this webinar because you're on the email list. And if you had gotten the link to this, you probably signed up for it. Here's a reason why we don't just give this link away. It's free, but we don't just give the link away. It's simply just because we want to know which of our readers is interested in what topics, right? Because this is very different than some of the topics that Benji writes about. And so we just ask you to click on it. So you can get it if you're on our email. I assume you're on this webinar because you're on our email list. Any one of these yellow boxes where we have it, just enter the email that you're on this list for, and it should auto send to you immediately. Yeah, the whole point is to play with it. Okay, so that's that. So I then have these little gray sections here that I was playing with when I was making it. So we have about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to talk about that. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask. I'm glancing over at the questions section now. I'm going to take another sip of water. And feel free to ask really specific questions about your business, like we don't know this, or this is a problem for us, etc. Okay, so what we covered, how this basically works, and how in the real world for your business you should probably be starting here and kind of have an idea. We should probably get to a cost of acquisition that's this amount, and then see, okay, we don't know these numbers, or these numbers are really bad. And our cost of acquisition is huge. We need, we need like under a 200 and it's 2,000 right now. And then play with the sensitivities, play with the graphs to see, okay, what do we need to change and what is the fastest way to get to that? Do we need more traffic? Do we need better conversion rate? And what can we focus on? And then you can do one thing at a time. So we talked about that. Now, when you get these numbers though, a lot of people who are in charge of content, they want to compare and say, is content better than these other acquisition channels? There's nothing wrong with that. Benji did that at his last company and has written about it on Grow and Convert a lot, where after a while he said to his company, look, we're measuring all of this and we're acquiring customers at a fraction of the cost of our outbound sales technique. All right, so here I've put, so just, warning here, I've put a very basic modeling for paid acquisition, cost of acquisition, CAC, and outbound sales. It could be wrong. I haven't thought about this as carefully as I thought about it for content marketing. It could have holes in it, etc. So just sort of be careful. We will probably sort of vamp this stuff up later in subsequent models, etc. But for now, I just wanted to kind of show you guys that you could kind of add this in real fast and how you would do it. Okay. So Annie, I see your question about an agency. So let me finish my train of thought here, and we'll get back to it. That's a good question. So I have two sort of competing acquisition costs here that you can model and kind of compare to. And I think this is really important, actually. And I, make these little jabs and jokes about how there's sort of infighting within companies and different departments, and that's true. But even just if you're the founder and there's no infighting, everyone's on the same team or you're working whatever, it's good to kind of compare and see honestly, like, is content working? I mean, maybe you guys have some absurd paid ad like scheme that is just unbeatable. You should know that, or your outbound sales is working really well. You should know that, and even if that means you deprioritize content, that's an honest way to run marketing from a numerical, quantitative perspective, right? So, paid acquisition. So this is the reason on the B2C side where I've left this blank is because B2C self-serve doesn't have outbound sales, right? So if you have an e-commerce store or whatever, you're not doing outbound sales, but you probably are doing paid ads. And so let's talk about that one first. So I just have built this, pretty simply. So the actual funnel for calculating like how many leads are acquired would be monthly unique visitors to a landing page or wherever the paid ad traffic is going. Homepage, that's not a good idea, but a lot of people do that. And then I presume a landing page, say, so I have this at 10,000, so that'll be whatever, your spend is, adjust the amount of people that are actually hitting that page. And then they convert at some rate, right? So maybe they're starting up for a free trial at 8%. It's common. So then that gives you a free trials per month. And then the free trials has some percentage conversion rate. I've set this to be equal to the same cell above because presumably once they get to free trial, they're converting at a similar rate. That's not always true. If your company is more astute at measuring, then you should have a free trial conversion number that's different by channel. But for now, I've just set this up. Then for costs, it's actually really simple. And compared to content marketing, you have a cost per click, right? And then you have some certain number of clicks that you're getting. So I'm setting that equal to monthly unique visitors. So you say, we're paying $2 a click and we're buying, whatever number of clicks or visitors. And so my cost is 20 grand if it's 10,000, right? $2 times 20. And so that's 20 grand. And so this is the cost. And so it's actually a lot simpler. And so you take 20 grand and you divide by the number of paying customers you acquired, 80, and you get to some paid ad CAC 250, which is reasonable. Like a lot of companies, 250 is reasonable to acquire a customer for that amount. It could be that this is a lot higher. Maybe you're paying $10 because you sell flowers online or something that is really competitive. Or somebody in the chat said $4, etc. So adjust it. It's a model. Okay. So there's something that's interesting that is unfair in this model, and I want to see if anyone can guess it. I'm including costs for content marketing that I'm not including here. I mean, can you immediately see what that is? / is anyone awake? If so, you can mention it in the chat. Like what is unfair here that I'm not including for the paid ad cost of acquisition that I am including for content marketing? Kevin says yes. Kevin, you're awake. Now, then the next step would be the answer to the question. Salary, exactly. Thank you, Annie. Annie and Julia. There's no staff, and this is it's almost kind of intentional because as I did research for this and Googled around like people that have built similar stuff and written blog posts about it. Nobody calculates that. When they do cost of acquisition for PPC, and I should say nobody, I'm sure there's somebody like it would be like, I did that. What are you talking about? So good job, random person that's angry at me. But most of articles and stuff that I ran into don't do that. They're just like, oh, our cost of acquisition. And often it's because agencies are the ones running PPC and they don't factor in their own costs when they're telling the client that because it's in their interest not to. And so they'll just be like, yeah, you're paying X dollars per click, $4 per click. You're getting 10,000 clicks. So it's 40,000 monthly ad spend, cost. And from that, we're getting 80 paid customers. So this is your acquisition cost. Okay, how much am I paying you, right? The agency. How much am I paying what fraction of full-time inside in-house employee staff is spent to manage you and answer your emails and get on those weekly calls and think about that internally. Very rarely have I seen a situation where a paid ad team just runs everything and the CEO is like, thank you for making us money. No, like the internal staff spends actually a decent amount of the time interfacing with that agency and talking about it. Often there's a full-time hire. I've seen like big companies that have literally a junior person who's a marketing manager that spends a lot of their time just managing that person. That is a junior person, but their salary is non-trivial. Like even if it's a $60,000 person salary times 1.3, et cetera, it's thousands of dollars a month extra that we're paying. Yes, compared to some companies' monthly ad spend costs, it can be tiny, right? $40,000 a month on ads. If there's a couple $1,000s to an agency, it can be trivial. That's fine, but you should include that. So if you're the content person advocating for your channel, include that and be like, hey, I drew this up, PPC team. Can I get these numbers? How much are we paying for click on average? How many clicks are we spending on average? What is our landing page converting at to free trials? How many free trials are we getting? Double check. Wait, this doesn't make sense. It says 800, but I know from Google Analytics that we're only getting, like 400. So what's going on? You can double check a lot of people with this. You may make some enemies, but you're being honest. And then free trial conversion rate for those people. So when you do all of this, Just compare apples to apples and be honest there. The other comparison point here is human resource. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you could add HR costs. Yeah, there are, I guess, a lot of overall kind of company costs. Like where do you draw the line? You say, oh, the CEO spends X percentage of her time also managing this. Like, well, how do you draw that line? And that's hard. I mean, that gets into this whole sort of sphere of attribution and sort of accounting, right? So a lot of accountant type people and finance people that do finance models, they think about this carefully. And they do projections where there are sort of best practices on how you attribute stuff. I think that's a little bit too it's even too geeky for this, which can you imagine? So sort of not getting into those details, but that's up to you and your company to acquire it. And then here I have an outbound sales one. It's kind of similar. So it's sort of the cost of monthly salespeople, and then the number of salespeople you have. So the total number, right? So if you're paying them $12.50, so I assume 150,000 to them. I just put a number in here. Times two, there's some cost to there's like their salary costs. They may be using like sales software and stuff, right? So they may be buying lists. You should include that. They may be, Salesforce or whatever. You should include that. Any other sort of technical or outside costs they have, include that. And then how many customers are they getting a month? I just put this as one line, and I just put a number in here because that is really sort of variable. There's not kind of this funnel like paid ads, so you probably have to just sort of ask them or look in Salesforce or whatever, and see how much are they acquiring customers for. It's not unreasonable for big B2B sort of enterprise SaaS or enterprise type products agencies to spend thousands of dollars per customer, because the moment they get one deal, the deal could be worth $10,000 a month or whatever, or it could be worth even $1,000 a month, but people stay on for 3 to 4 years. And so there are many companies that happily pay that. Yours might be one of them. So here you have, and these, like I said, is not as refined. It's not as thorough. I kind of just put these in there because I thought it'd be nice if I were in your shoes, and I'm calculating this for myself, to be like, okay, great, we have a number. How does it compare to other acquisition channels? So I just wanted to kind of put the skeleton there and the framework there for you to kind of revamp that for whatever other acquisition channels you're using. All right, so I'm going to start taking questions, and I don't have a hard stop here at the top of the hour, so I'll keep going past it. So let me start, before I get down to some of these bottom questions. I ignored Annie's question. So she asks, can you talk more about Snowball and breaking point idea, like that idea that the content marketing has this breaking point after which the costs are incredibly low. If you're an agency, from the agency's perspective, to how to determine if content is right strategy for the client with a small budget. Great question. Often, and I know that firsthand running an agency, clients that are smaller businesses will come to you with a really open sky type question. Hey, you're a marketing expert, right? Like you do like one marketing subspecialty, and they'll just assume. And should I do this? And we actually get those emails of Grow and Convert. Hey, this is my website. Is content marketing right for me? So nowadays we are fortunate enough to have enough traffic to where it's getting harder and harder to respond to all of them. But it's interesting. So if somebody asks you that, what do you do? I think there's one step in my mind to answer this question before you even get into like a model, right? Because when somebody is that early, and that may be your company. You may have built up. There are companies we work with that have built up 8-figure businesses without doing any content marketing, all through one channel, outbound sales. And then they're like, "Hey guys, Benji and Davish, like I read your blah blah blah. Should we do content marketing? A lot of our competitors do it, and now we need more like leads, whatever. And we're thinking about it. Like, how can we estimate? And a CEO may literally has on the phone said, how many months would we have to spend on this to be able to acquire customers at a reasonable cost? Like, whoa. Okay. So I think there's the qualitative and the quantitative. The qualitative question is content marketing a reasonable way to grab their targeted customers' attention? And a big thing here is, how complex is the product? And is it sort of widespread commoditized consumer type stuff? that latter group, widespread commoditized consumer type products, it's very, very hard to do content marketing on. This is a topic that I've thought about asking Benji to write about, because there have been companies that said, hey, can you help this and that client? And he'll just say, I don't think so. Like, how do you do content marketing from it? And we haven't really written about that. But we're happy to, and we may, because, so let me give some examples. So I often like to give examples of like Coke and Pepsi in our articles. So that's a good example. Like, and it's kind of ridiculous, but say you have some other commoditized products like soft drinks, right? Or some equivalent of that. You're selling like some random thing. Like, is this really going to work? Like, imagine if Pepsi wanted to really like start a blog. Like, yeah, they would get traffic maybe if their blog was good, but like if you sell some commodity, I don't know, like pillows or something, like what are you going to write about? And you could maybe get this to work, but even if you write about it, right? So imagine you sell like lotion, like right? So there's like sort of boutiques that sell, say like, imagine kind of the Body Shop or Bed Bath and Beyond type stuff, like that sell like, like cosmetic products or something. On the one hand, actually, cosmetic problems, there's a huge content marketing opportunity, but something kind of more simple like socks, like basic like undershirts, something. It's not easy. So I would ask that question first, like who are their customers? It would be the user research type articles that you can look at on Grow and Convert. Can I attract them with content? Because there's this big assumption we're making here that these monthly unique visitors, these 30,000, even if this was 300,000, that some decent fraction of them are going to like take the first step towards purchasing. Yeah, I've used a SaaS example and say free trials. Maybe that's like add to cart or get onto the e-commerce store or whatever your business is, your Etsy store or whatever, right? Are they going to do that? And when you have like widespread, you sell some like generic thing, it's really hard to do that with content. And that's why I think one of the big reasons why a lot of e-commerce small businesses, and small business and e-commerce could mean 7 figures, right? Because the big business is huge. They don't start with blogs. They start with like paid ads or affiliate stuff or whatever. Maybe they do SEO, right? And there's some content involved there to get links, but it's not easy. Once that's done, I would then you can say, okay, if those boxes check, what I would recommend, Annie, is then just put in reasonable numbers and say these are the targets that we'd have to hit. And yeah, you're going to kind of like end up holding yourself to that, but that's between you and the client to set those expectations right. Look, like I ran these numbers. We both think that it's actually, we can get targeted unique visitors that's not just generic random people that have some proportional likelihood of buying. I looked at some other sort of competitors. We think we'll get 30,000 people. If we can get a percent of them to opt into your like ebook or free trial or whatever, and then 10% of those marketing qualified leads to convert, then we would be in good shape. So let's start to get there. First step, let's get to 5,000, 10,000. Then let's monitor the conversion rate and get those hooked up. That's how I would go about doing that. First, decide, can we even get reasonable people? Then run the numbers and have that be goals. Whew, that took a lot longer than I wanted. I'm sorry. Okay. Any advice when the client acquisition cycle can last for 1 to 2 months? That's okay, Bogdan. So in that case, that's built in here. So what you would do is say in presuming, because you asked the agency question, I actually know that you work for an agency. What you would do here is say, okay, we have some amount of visitors to our blog. We know some amount of them fill out this like request a demo or talk to a salesperson or whatever, download or this and that, where a human being will talk to them at some percentage. You can calculate that from GA if you set up goals, right? And we'll get this many leads per month. It's okay if those leads take 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever to convert. But you just should know over time, have some historical measurement and say, in general, we found that 10% of them are converting. I don't think the fact that it takes a long time will matter. Okay, so what if not all paying customers are created equally? Goff, Bacall, Farah and Company LLC. I'd love a clarification on that. Not all paying customers are created equally. So, okay. So I have a feeling, you can feel free to clarify, but I have a feeling I know what you're talking about. So here we're saying 33 paying customers. Actually, this is cost of acquisition. So I have a slide here. So all we're doing here is modeling. This is in a section of like what we're not doing. All we're doing here is modeling this cost of acquisition. What you're saying is, fine, I may have acquired in this example 33 paying customers, and I've paid 126 each for them. Regardless of how much they're worth to you, that's true. Like if you actually measure these numbers, you've paid 126 on average for these 33 customers. What your question, I think, is implying is, okay, great, so you're a CPA firm. Some of those paying customers may only do taxes with you in February, and they pay you $500. Some of them may have a big thing and they pay monthly over the year, and they're worth thousands of dollars, and they stay with you for years. That's a great point. That is the lifetime value of the customer. So when you decide, so let me just re-emphasize this is important, and thank you for asking that question so I can get to things that I was just skipping over. This entire model is for this cost of acquisition. To decide whether a route, a marketing channel is profitable for you, it's the difference between these two. What is the lifetime value of this customer, right? And so that's why I said work from here and know on average, when we get paying customers, what are they worth? And then therefore, what does our cost need to be? Now, if you're saying, well, it's different per channel, then yes, pay attention. We haven't discussed this at all, and this model doesn't talk about it, and I'm happy to if you could send me an email, like you got to this webinar from an email. If you have specific questions, I'd love for you to respond to that email that you got to this webinar from and just ask me. I'd love if you discuss this, that, and the other. These are the questions I have. And I'm happy to write subsequent articles about it. What you could do is say, because a lot of people may say this, hey, yeah, you're getting 33 customers, but the customers you're getting from content are crappy. That might be true, right? And so what that means is you have a task of figuring out what the value of those customers are. So for a CPA firm, if you wrote a bunch of articles on taxes and one of them is ranking high, and that's the reason you're getting 30,000 visitors, and so the 33 customers you're getting from it, or maybe the 5 customers you're getting from it, are just these tax customers that pay you $500 a year, then you know that from content, the customers you acquire have a lifetime value of, say, I don't know, $500 times like 3 years of doing taxes with you, $1,500 or something like that. That's fine. You may know that through other routes, a referral strategy, maybe you speak at like local like meetup groups or seminars, you get much more valuable companies or big companies or whatever. That's fine. Then just know that your LTV, you want to compare to the LTV like per channel. So your like, I don't know, conference speaking strategy, like how much do you spend to do that of your time or whatever. So you have a cost of acquisition for that channel and an LTV for that channel, and that's your profit for that channel. So your question is about this, so I'd figure this out, and then you can figure that out by channel. That's actually a really astute and thorough and responsible way to do it, I think. Julia Perry asks, so by human resource, I meant staff salary acquisition, but fair enough, that does raise an HR question. Yep. So that's there. So feel free to ask any other questions. I'll shut down in a little bit. I wanted to talk about a couple other things. Like one thing we're not including that a lot of people have talked to me about personally is, hey, in your model, you're only counting customers that like land and then convert immediately, to free trial or whatever, or to like, fill out a form to talk to you or talk to your salesperson, and then eventually do that. But what about other ways that content helps? Like, what about customers that maybe were acquired through outbound sales, but they were nurtured for a long time after they talked to a salesperson, and it was through building trust in our brand that content helped with, that they eventually converted? That's a good question. And it's well beyond this kind of sort of simple Excel model. And it involves sort of a topic called multi-touch attribution, which is like, how do I attribute a sale when they touch different aspects of the business? Salespeople, plus content, plus maybe paid ads or whatever, right? And so that's not simple. It's not discussed here, but I just want to know that that's something that I'm fully aware of. This models like immediate conversion. So you can almost call it last touch. You would say 30,000 visitors who went to the blog and from a blog post in that session converted to free trial, right? So you could say, regardless of what their history is, they may have talked to us a bunch of times, they may have met the CEO or the owner of the CPA firm at a conference, et cetera, et cetera. but then eventually they got to a content piece and signed up for a free trial, and you're attributing it there. A lot of content people say, I'm underestimating here. What about all the other ways that content can help? Then what you can do is use this as a lower limit estimate. It's better than nothing. We may later produce some stuff. It may or may not be just simple blog posts because it's a little bit more complex. But we may sort of produce some stuff about like ways that you can measure this. It'll require tools that are not as simple as Google Analytics, because Google Analytics is session based. So it doesn't just track the history of a user. It tracks like a particular session, which is defined as like using the website continuously without a 30-minute break or closing your browser, right? And so you need some other tools. You can use sort of post-sale surveys to then help attribute. There are ways to do it, but it's a little bit more complicated. So I wanted to just keep that in mind. I did want to plug, so these webinars, this is the first time we're doing it. We did it because some folks suggested it and said, hey, this is really cool. Instead of just writing a blog post, why don't you do this? It's on YouTube. It's going to be recorded. So we're not like launching a course behind this or whatever, but I wanted to mention two things. So a lot of you have heard about Grow and Convert Live. If you're interested, I'm not going to do a hard sell. I'm going to talk about it for 2 seconds. If you're interested, go to growandconvert.com/live. You can read all about it. But Benji and I are experimenting with something where we'll literally fly to like, anywhere in the contiguous US. And if you want us to come internationally, we can talk about it. And come to your business for an entire day and do a workshop where we build these models out for you, for your business. We talk about all aspects of our content marketing, from user research, etc. So that's it on that part. There are a few more questions. Nope, that's it. So those are the questions. A couple things that I'd love for those that are still there. There's 21 people here. If you're still listening, a couple things that I'm thinking about doing. One is, a lot of people have issues with knowing this number. How many people actually fill out a form or do whatever action from content, and how do I measure that? I'd love to know in the comments, like, are you guys measuring that in Google Analytics or wherever? And if not, would a post or content or whatever that talks about that be helpful? That is one question that I have. I'm thinking about writing that. So let me know. Another question I have is around LTV and some of these other comments. So Jeff or Goff Baca Alfera and the CPA firm, he asked, what about the value of the customer? I'm happy to do sort of some content around how to figure that out. So if other people have questions about that, let me know in the comments as well. So I'll stick around for a bit if there's any other questions, and if there aren't, or I don't see questions for the next couple of minutes, then that's it. So thanks for coming. All right, thanks everyone. It looks like everyone is done. I had a good time. Any other questions, just ask me over email.